we don't have jobs for life anymore. We know people have jobs for about 3 to 5 years. So if you don't want to be in a self-perpetuating cycle of losing people through attrition and going back to market, we have to really work out how we bind people, boosting that upskilling of the entire workforce. And I think we've got a really good live example of that, where Advania have done some real best-in-class stuff with that. So we've expanded our skill set as a whole across the entire company. We have leveled up to where we need to be in the market from having an entire workforce that understand the use of AI, and they're now using it, and we're creating efficiencies all the time.
Welcome back to the Technology Boardroom. I'm Steve Goodmanfield, CTO at Advania UK, and I'm joined by Eden. Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Steve. Quick introduction on myself. I'm Eden Pedley, and I am Head of Resource Solutions and Workforce at Professional Services at Advania.
So yeah, we've got the same boss now, I think. Your boss was telling me very much about what you and the team are doing, and it's quite a new role to Advania, isn't it?
Yeah.
As we grow, it's become quite essential. So for those that don't know what workforce planning is, because honestly, I didn't until recently. Do you want to just tell us what that is and why it's so important to a technology business?
So workforce planning, or some people call it strategic workforce planning. It's kind of a catch-all name for all things related to kind of talent strategy, the people that work here, and making sure we've got the right people and the right skills in the business to be able to achieve the goals that we want, really. So it's kind of that continual process of identifying your gaps in your workforce and developing a strategy to ensure that you've got those people skills. As I said, there's no one size fits all, because it's dependent on the business and kind of the area that you're in, really. And it is an iterative process, and it's often driven by market changes, because we can think we know what we want one minute, and then we can think we need to change that the next. It's often a multi-departmental effort. So some places it will sit with HR, some people it will sit within your talent team. I kind of touch on it here at Advania in the fact that I kind of sit in professional services, and I do the operational resource management side of things, but also specialising in early talent, which is a critical part of kind of future-proofing your workforce. So yeah, that's kind of strategic workforce planning in a nutshell, really.
So on the show today, we are going to talk about early years of people's careers, and also how AI changes things, because I spend a lot of time talking to our customers at the beginning of the pipeline of potentially us doing some work, where we're thinking with our clients, what's next? What does their business need? How can technology help, or sometimes not help? What are the things that they might need to prioritize? And certainly with AI, and less about what it can do, but in this respect, how fast it's changing.
Yeah.
And how it has potential to change roles. For example, in security, where you might think of a big security operations center that looks like it's something out of a 90s James Bond movie with screens along the wall, or a NASA control center. Whereas that version of the future, I was talking to someone from Microsoft the other day, and said, well, it just might be a message coming to your phone to tell you that there's a problem that just needs your approval before it solves. And things like that change massively, like people's potential career directions as well, don't they? So you've got all of that planning, but also a bit of uncertainty on the way for what we all need, what our careers will be in a few years' time.
Absolutely. I think, a cliche saying, but the only thing certain is change at the minute, and that change is rapid fire. So if we think back to years and years and years ago, strategic workforce planning was so easy, because a job was for life. Someone started a job, they progressed in it, and they eventually retired. So strategic workforce planning was, who's due to retire? Okay, how are we replacing them? You often traditionally replaced at the bottom, because people ultimately just moved up through the ranks. So it wasn't that challenging. We think about where we are now, particularly in the world of tech, where we almost don't know what's going to change next. We know it's going to change, and we can kind of have a line of sight on what's coming, but we don't know exactly what's coming. We have kind of the imagination to make assumptions on what's going to go. But if you ask me to predict exactly what skill I need coming, that's a really difficult place to be. Who knows? So strategic workforce planning is becoming ever more important in making sure that you've got a workforce that is agile, but also a plan on how you're going to address that change when it comes. And so, Steve, I suppose at that point then, where do you think AI is likely to impact in the next few years and past that?
Well, there's a lot of hype around this. So there's so many different areas where AI and automation have affected people, already over the years. So, automation machine learning to be able to do things or repeat things that somebody else can do isn't necessarily that new. But the change that we're seeing is the boardroom of our clients taking note that they've seen something in it that has potential to change efficiencies in one way, but also the makeup of a workforce. There's positives to that for anybody that grabs hold of it. A bit like the cloud. As a technology professional, I feared the cloud. I think, I spent maybe 15, 14 years writing about Microsoft 365 and what came before it. But at the outset, I remember walking out of a meeting with the CIO thinking, what do I do next? What's the point of my job? And I've had that conversation over and over again with people over the years. And some of that is going to impact technology jobs. There's obviously a wider impact that affects people in contact centers potentially. It affects the way people do things as well. It means that where there's more demand, you might not need to increase the number of people in a workforce as much. But it does mean that the skills people need to be able to, in a technology role, do what a customer needs, are changing quite rapidly. In that a developer, for example, might a year ago or 2 years ago have been able to think, right, okay, over the next 2 years, I might need to improve my skills because there's a new version of .NET coming out. We might need to convert our applications to .NET Core. We might need to get some of the team learning about, like in the past, it would have been learning about SPFX. Might need to be knowing how to do that. For the next couple of years, we'll have a long sort of lead up time where there's a new skill, and then there's technologies that we might then have projects to build things around, and they'll come along almost really about the same point. Ideally, we'll be ready for them, or we'll be just on the cusp of having all of those skills and experience as we get some bigger projects come along where those are going to come into play. But last week, our developers were doing a hackathon, and some of this stuff was completely new to them. And the Microsoft folk working with them, they weren't experts on it either because it was new. And that was some of the Microsoft agent-based stuff, where that's basically AI chatbots talking to one another, helping each other get along to complete a goal together. And that's a new thing that almost immediately, if I talk to one of our customers about, then it's of interest to them. And literally the week after, yesterday, I was talking to a customer, and the team that are developing some AI apps for him were the people in the hackathon. And I separately mentioned about the agent-based stuff. And I wouldn't be surprised if that customer asks to know what we can do with it, even though it's that new of a technology in just the AI world. But it has some immediate value because there's the ways that people are doing stuff are just iterating very, very quickly. It's scaring some of the massive technology companies. Like Meta, I think, had a leak of something to open source. It catapulted an open source industry of working on this stuff. Google got terrified by this. Microsoft, reasonably strategically well, bought in quite early before any of this was a big thing. What we know as ChatGPT is apparently the first version of that was something shown to Bill Gates. So Microsoft have leveraged it in their own way as well. But it means that there's a lot of changes, and it's very, very quick, and it's hard to predict what you might need to learn about next, because people on the customer side will see something that is actually ready enough to provide immediate business value, even though it might be brand new. And jumping on that is extremely difficult. And predicting what someone might need in 2 years' time can be difficult. Because a week ago, I couldn't have predicted that a conversation about agents with a customer this week would be something that actually might turn into something that they might go in a month or two's time. We should build the next iteration using that. Usually there'd be a 2-3 years sort of turnaround for newer technology to bake its way into things that will be put in the hands of professionals in the businesses that we serve.
Yeah. And I think to touch on that and add and kind of overlay that strategic workforce planning lens then to some of the things that you said, in SWP, we talk about things called the Bs. Now, depending on who you ask, there might be 3 Bs, there might be 4 Bs, there might be 5 Bs. I say there's 6. So we can buy, build and borrow. They're the traditional 3 Bs. So we can buy talent, we can build talent, and we can borrow talent, right? So, and lots of companies already have that down. It's a standard way of kind of going to market to get your talent. And it's nothing groundbreaking. They're incredibly important still and will always be a real part of strategic workforce planning, but kind of more of traditional in that sense. But then we've got bind, boost, and build. Now, they're where I think more as we think about tomorrow's workforce and kind of we move forward, where if I was to be a betting woman, I'd edge my bets that if you want to kind of keep pace as a company and help your talent, that I would focus on that bind, boost and build. Sorry, short on words there. Because the bind is the retention piece, right? Because that's really important now because we don't have jobs for life anymore. We know people have jobs for about 3 to 5 years. So if you don't want to be in a self-perpetuating cycle of kind of losing people through attrition and going back to market, we have to really work out how we bind people, boosting that upskilling of the entire workforce. And I think we've got a really good live example of that kind of where Advania have done some real best-in-class stuff with that. So if we take, for example, Copilot and the fact that we rolled it out to 100% of our employees, right? We boosted our entire workforce. We brought every single member of our workforce up to speed. We broadened everyone's skill set because we've done lots of Copilot training sessions. And we've taught everyone in our workforce how to get on board with it. So we've expanded our skill set as a whole across the entire company. We have leveled up to where we need to be in the market from having an entire workforce that understand the use of AI and they're now using it and we're creating efficiencies all the time. So that's a fantastic example there of taking your whole workforce and moving them in the right direction with you. And then you've got the build piece, which is part of the traditional, but that's that constant building your own talent, but reskilling in particular areas. So to your example of those developers that were out working at Microsoft that didn't really know what they were doing there, in order to make sure that they stay with like you as a company and that your strategic workforce plan is moving in the right direction, what I think those organizations that will be one step ahead will do is make sure that they've got the kind of internal function and ability constantly upskill people, to constantly put people on the courses that they want to be on, to constantly develop and learn, so that whilst we can't get ahead of it because we didn't know it was coming, we can absolutely stay in lockstep with it by having that fantastic ability to continually develop and educate and retrain our people.
I think there's a part of that that's really important there, though, that is there's a lot of base skills that are not AI. They're not for the people that are experts in them. It's not even the boring stuff. But if we take Copilot, for example, upskilling a workforce to be good power users of it doesn't honestly make you good at implementing some of the things that we have to do to support it. And a lot of it always goes back to things that people might have learned 20 years ago. That experience, the understanding of risk with data is, a key thing with something like Copilot, where the advice you might be giving to a large bank or financial services or professional services, law firm, whoever they are, is going to be based around understanding their industry and their challenges and understanding the risks, the likelihood of things, because knowing about what is likely to happen, being able to have an intelligent, deep conversation with a fellow professional, a peer really on our client side, who also understands this really, really well, but doesn't necessarily understand the AI bit, is really key. Because if you just knew about the AI bit, you just knew about the new stuff. Not that the old stuff is also like brand new, like a year or two old in many cases. The supporting things like the compliance tools, the things that we use to make it so that you can't accidentally see the wrong information. or Copilot doesn't integrate a confidential document into a marketing presentation that's going to be shown to 100 people, for example. Knowing how to do that and do it to just the right degree that it doesn't inconvenience users so they don't go off and use them at all. Those are difficult skills to gain and, of course, retain, because that's the valuable part. Is not just having a CV that says, well, I've had 10 jobs in AI over the last year, and I've succeeded in all of them, of course. You'll see people with some variation that's not as extreme as that, but that there's a learning curve that can take a long time to go through. So you're at a point where you can learn the new stuff. Our developers can pick up some of this new stuff on their side very quickly because they know all those fundamentals.
Yeah.
But if you were just starting with some of the basics, then you wouldn't understand how to put the pieces together to build it.
And I think that's where, from a strategic workforce lens as well, a lot of organisations now, and there's so many reports that have come out this year. I think Randstad's 2024 report talks really, really heavily. And also they have a business review on moving to being a skills-based organisation as we move forward to address those not knowing what's coming next. So to your point, exactly that. It's that this is what we know we need eventually, and we know you can learn that, but what do you have already that's going to be able to make you turn your hand to it quicker and for us to get at the forefront of it? So that's why I think as we move forward into kind of this new world of not really knowing what's coming next and how to be on the front foot with that skills-based evaluation of our workforce will be ever more important. And again, to bring that back to AI, there are lots of technologies out there already. And I know Thea, our CPO, mentioned that she'd been at a conference where they talked about how AI is going to impact that HR world by being able to doing a skills-based analysis of your workforce for you by uploading everyone's credentials and telling you where those skills are transferable into another role. So it will absolutely, I think AI will end up helping us navigate what skills we need better eventually also.
I was going to say, so AI is going to be helping us pick our next job. Yeah. But then I'm old enough to remember when I was at school, the careers advisor had this green terminal or something like that, where you typed in things you liked. So you could be a bin man or a rocket scientist or something like that. So some form of this has been around. That's why personal computers came around. So that's what Excel was to accountants, right? They're to make professionals in a role be better at what they do and to get rid of some of the laborious dross, at least hopefully, rather than replace. Though if I look back to first jobs, data inputters, things like that, jobs like that might be less common, but did they get, would they have went anywhere? But in our kind of careers, then that means that there's roles in technology companies then where you can plan for the skills that you need, because fundamentally data, security, understanding the architecture of those to build a good foundation. I think those are going to be common things. They are at a stage where for a lot of things such as Microsoft 365, Azure, there is standard ways of doing it. However, the landscapes of those technologies are so vast compared to a traditional on-premises data center, in a basement at a small or medium customer, that it's still, as the technology grows and there's more services to choose from, putting that together, knowing what the right tool is to use when for whatever the business needs, that those things are still going to be key. And they're also the key bits that sit around AI technologies to make them work. If we're thinking of a web chatbot or private chat GPT, it still relies upon having a network connection and a website and a database. And those fundamentals of building, those might be easier for a developer to do, might be quicker to make changes to. But if you don't understand how it all plugs together, then when it goes wrong, then AI isn't going to be as helpful. It's a bit like having a calculator and not knowing how to do the sum. If AI did the sum and you don't know how it worked it out, it's like the same reason why we were at school, we couldn't use a calculator, because you've got to understand the working of it.
Absolutely.
To be able to know that the answer's right at the end. And that applies to putting stuff together, troubleshooting things, writing code, using AI. It applies to anything, writing marketing content. If you don't know the subject very well, you don't know what you're publishing. That's why we see so much junk content now on the internet. You read it, it just makes no sense. So it's those core skills, I think, massively, massively important to maintain, but also grow, especially when you're talking about people moving roles.
Absolutely. And I think that's where if I apply kind of the world that I've come from, which is more people teams, kind of business ops, that's where your people teams really come into their own. And that's why it's incredibly important. I think that people teams are all connected at the hip when that's like L&D, HR, talent, because that function those functions speak into each other really well are what help this kind of operational side of things drive forward. So as you say, those core skills are always going to be there, and we're always going to need to make sure we've got those core skills. We're going to have those developers. But when we realize what we need is to kind of redirect those developers or build on those skills, do we have an L&D team that are incredibly reactive and an organization that are willing to invest to put that pathway in place to get those developers the next set of skills they need to keep up with market? And I think that's where that people will need to move to be forward thinking, because we know there's a shortage of talent in the tech, in the tech industry. There has been. It won't go away because tech will continue to develop at a speed that we can't keep up with. And so there will always be some kind of shortage. So it's about that kind of internal marketplace and that reinvestment of existing staff to be able to give them skills so that we as an organisation can keep up with what the market is doing.
Do you see then, because it sounds like what you were talking about, Thea, is along those lines, that AI as a tool to help people plan that path to get from A to B? Because I would imagine that if I spoke to a HR professional, then unless they had a really good understanding of my skill set and what those particular skills are themselves, which for a workforce of thousands must be nigh on impossible to do, to give a really customized, accurate sort of, if you learn about these things, then you can get to point B in perhaps 18 months, 2 years. I couldn't imagine that I'll be able to get a real sort of answer unless you went to someone who was really absolutely immersed in the technology industry and your business and knew what your jobs were.
We have some fantastic platforms already here at Advania, such as kind of LinkedIn Learn and Skills Base, that can kind of point you in the direction for you want to be promoted into kind of the next role, or you want to become, a senior developer. What does that look like? What certs do those people have? Therefore, I know I need to work towards that. But I think where I see AI impacting that, if I was to kind of hazard a guess at where that will go in the future, is it will be a much more kind of bespoke and an easier way to find it, because you will be able to ask it, show me a career path in X, show me a career path in Y, and it will draw down on all the people within your organisation already that have that and kind of give you that bespoke next step tailoring. Yeah, I think it will do. I would caveat that with, what it won't do, I don't believe, is as we progress, teach you those kind of non-technical human leadership skills that are very much learned through watching other people operate that are softer skills. I don't believe it will be able to show you exactly that. So I do think it will have a limit in that sense, personal opinion.
I mean, there are things like presenter coach, things like that in PowerPoint. But I'm a Microsoft 365 MVP. I don't think the tool's bad, but I'd rather hear it from somebody who is conveying that than be told you could slow down a bit here or there, because actually sometimes the things that get picked out from tools, they're not necessarily a bad thing, because the speaking cadence, like there's TV presenters like BBC News people who have unusual cadences as they speak and talk about a topic, and that's part of who they are. But an AI coach would try and change them to leave solid gaps and pace themselves a little bit better. So I agree. Sometimes there's a human element that is the imperfect is exactly what you want in, say, speaking and things like that. It's what gives you that difference, because we want to be unique in what we do and the way that we go about it, and taking that experience from the people as well. But there's got to be a place for it, right?
Yeah, 100% there's a place for it. And I think it can do some of the legwork as well. Like, that we've tried to do, you do gap analysis when it comes to career development and how do I get to the next stage and all that. And I think it can absolutely do some of that. But as I say, there's kind of, as you look to push through your career and kind of progress, and if that's whether that's into leadership or becoming more senior so you can client face more, I think there are a certain amount of skills I certainly believe that you learn kind of in person and from other people. Absolutely.
And how does that fit into things like mentoring then? Because that's something that it's been a thing for many years. Microsoft have certainly encouraged it as well. MVPs to mentor early career folk. How do you see that progressing? Is there still value in it?
I think there's absolutely still value in it. And I think, so I suppose if I zoom out a bit, I don't profess to be an expert in this area, but it's something that I'm incredibly interested in, kind of thinking about what will, 10 and 20 years from now, what will it look like? What will we want? What will we need? And it's something that really kind of interests me. And I do my best to kind of try and understand it, because 10, 20 years from now, I'm still going to be in the workforce, right? So I kind of want to be thinking about that anyway. And if we take a look at kind of like, say we think about something as simple as diversity, right? So when we think about diversity now, if I said diversity to you, I would assume that 9 out of 10 people would go to kind of gender, race, ethnicity, that kind of thing, because that's where we're kind of talking about diversity from now. But is there a point of thinking about in 10 or 20 years' time from now, age is going to be something that we're really going to have to consider from a diversity perspective, because we're living in an aging society, right? And we've got an aging workforce that do not require now at 60, because it's not feasible to retire at 60, but also people don't want to. People still want challenge. People still want to progress. And that's kind of a fact. People aren't retiring now at 60. And if you look back historically, it was very much an age equals stage kind of world of employment, in that you joined as a junior position and people older than you kind of distilled their knowledge on you and you learned from them. And as you aged, quite literally, you promoted, and that equaled more financial reward. And you carried on going, and then you retired. But we don't kind of do that now, and we are seeing disruption from a tech point of view, but I think we'll see disruption eventually to kind of retirement as we know it as well. But what that will mean for the workforce is that we've got loads of generations in the workforce that have all got different views of tech, that have all kind of understood tech in a very different way, that all have very different cultural expectations from how someone should behave in the workforce. And then so to bring that back to your point around mentoring, I think that as we move forward, mentoring will be really important to do kind of all across the board, both from a technical point of view. We know that mentoring is key to anyone's development now, and we all do that now, right? You've got someone that's junior in a role, give them someone senior, let them learn from that in a mentoring way. But also as we look forward, a decade or two, I think from a cultural place, mentoring will be really, really important to understand everyone's perspective, to be able to make sure that we have a continued holistic workforce. And I think a really good example of that is in France. They have something called the contracted generation, which I have absolutely just butchered in my northern accent. So apologies to anyone that's listening that speaks French. But what that essentially is all companies are mandated to have a mentorship agreement between anyone in their 50s and anyone in their 20s, so that they can reverse mentor each other on kind of what everybody's expectations are and how they want to work and the way they see the world. And I think if I was to kind of project that forward, I think that things like that will become ever more important for all of us, kind of learning from each other. So I think, yes, tech will advance and AI will advance also. And with that kind of, everyone will keep moving from it and skills will change. But in addition to skills, we'll also need to be changing how we all deal with and all contract each other as the workforce just becomes more and more varied and diverse.
I suppose we've seen that actually it's talked about a lot, but not in this context really. Whenever there's a push by companies to mandate return to the office as a sudden thing, and there's nothing wrong with hybrid working, right? But the sudden mandate and there's a clear, and you'll see this on TikTok videos about work as well quite a lot, that there is an uncomfortableness from some people, and they're not necessarily older people in the workforce, but people who are very much used to the way of working in an office, and they're used to being able to go and find someone, and that's how they work and communicate. And I know my mother-in-law, before she retired, she felt very, very uncomfortable in the new type of workplace where everyone seemed to be faster than her and people didn't really get her and she didn't get them. So she ended up taking early retirement, but she's got another job now. But I can't help think that she had a lot more to give. She was she worked at one of the large facilities management companies. She had massive clients that she was managing, and she was fantastic at it. But it's that common problem that we've seen where there's managers certainly that have struggled with managing remote teams, for example. But there's a cultural aspect to that, and I can see, you can see both sides where people have just felt this isn't what I want, this isn't what works for me. But the people that they're working with, who might be younger or might have only ever really worked that way, are completely at ease with it. And you get to a point where some businesses are like, right, return to office. Some are right, well, we'll mix it up and have it hybrid, and then it can be the worst of all worlds. Sometimes it works really well. So I suppose there's the reverse mentorship. It's more than just about just understanding people. It's understanding how they work and collaborate so that you can actually be productive with them rather than having to get them all into one place and go, right, well, now we're in the office for this day. This will be the day I feel is productive. And then they go home and be productive as a team remotely and do all their thing.
And I think that's where kind of, it's important to not be kind of make lazy stereotypes about different generations, because we all do it, right? So, we go with, what do we say? Oh, I'm a millennial, right, for example. So by all accounts, if I stopped drinking flat whites and buying avocados, I'd have a lot more money in the bank, right? And then, other people, my dad's a boomer. So obviously he bought a house for £300 and has got loads of money. We can make all those really lazy stereotypes.
Sometimes they're true. I think my dad's got a final salary pension.
Yeah.
We'll never get one of them.
And actually, you know what? I love avocados and flat whites. So they are true at times. But if we apply them in a work setting and just assume that either the kind of the older generation that are in workforce, that are in leadership at the minute, just dictate, we're all coming back to the office because this is how we worked, or we bow to the kind of, supposed demands of, well, we all just want to, work from a beach in Bali and never return to the office. It's not going to be productive for everyone, but there is a balance of, there is good in all those things,
Oh yeah.
And I kind of like entered the workforce, maybe, I don't know, coming up to 20 years ago now, something like that. And I looked up to a generation that were in office generation. First one in your seat and last one out of your seat meant commitment meant promotion. And I've kind of seen that entire transition. But I've got younger cousins, right, that are very much trying to figure out what's in it for them, because that generation, their generation very much have a focus on well-being and experience and do want careers, but it's not the be-all and end-all, because we've very much moved away from what we used to call a 3-stage life cycle, which was education, career, retirement. That's not something that we do anymore. That's not how people see it. People return to education later in life and go down an entirely different field. People don't retire because they want to keep going. Some people don't go into education in the way that we used to see it. But I think there's right things from all of that, right? So there's turning up at the office, saying you'll travel to an event, kind of being engaging. That's a good thing, right? We want commitment from people, and you want commitment from your workforce.
And it's healthy as well.
It's healthy, but also going, actually, I'm going to burn myself out is also a good, and I'm not going to do that, is also a good thing. So I think that as we move forward into an ever diverse and a workforce with 4 generations in it, the best learnings will come from listening to everyone that's got a seat at the table.
Yeah. So it's understanding what individuals need to be able to then get the best out of them. Absolutely. And then as senior people in the business have to do, which is to be able to be at peace with that, where there is a mix of how people are going to work and having the right tools in place. Like Microsoft have got some tools coming out where if you are going into the office and then you see actually the people in your team are going to be in another day, AI pops up and says, well, what about if you go in on a Wednesday instead before you book that? But to make things like that work, you've got to be able to do something with technology for that cascading effect of bookings for trains and things like all the things that you might have to do as part of that process to just make it work perfectly. And I think we're still waiting for that technology to be able to help with that sort of thing. It's so true. I think I used to be working with customers prior to COVID who were going full remote, and Microsoft were very much pushing work from anywhere, and work from anywhere was the word before hybrid working. It's kind of true. It's not about not being in the office. It's ideally not about the old, I suppose, the Generation X's BlackBerry that they would have in their hands. We used to talk about the kids. So the next generation probably grew up with those parents and ours, my generation, as an older millennial with phones in our hands, answering work emails out of hours. And then we've learned to switch off a little bit because work would otherwise just consume our day and night at home, but also respecting how other people work. I saw really in the pandemic, most of all, where content and coders I worked for at the time, most people worked in the office. And I always thought that's a bit weird because we're changing the way the world works. But then you realise when you're on calls with people that a lot of people have moved to London and lived in a 1-bedroom flat, for example. Whereas I'm in a 4-bedroom house, not quite in the countryside, but I've got more space and I've got a family around. And I learned really to have a lot more empathy for the way people live. And, sometimes people who were then living back at home who hadn't been for a long time and it felt uncomfortable for them day to day. And understanding those sort of things, you understand why some people, whatever their age, they want to be in an office, they want to be away from whatever the environment is that is at home. Sometimes it's not the most comfortable. Crying babies, all sorts of things go on in life. And I think that's more important almost than understanding that, you need to be a better manager of a hybrid workforce, the empathy side. But it's still an important skill to be able to manage a remote team or a work anywhere team.
Yeah, and I think that's an incredibly important part as we move forward as well into what will the next generation want. And I think that will be the ability to work in a way that equals success for them, as you just touched on. Do I want to be in an office? Do I want to be at home? Do I want to have the ability to do both? Do we as, do companies, do organisations still have that office space if I want to go work in it? But do they have a hybrid policy that also feels that it aligns to how I want to work, if I should see that freedom? And I think that more and more now, the next generation and maybe the one after that, will kind of enter into more of it. We do now, we enter into more of a social contract with our employer than I think we ever did before. Are we doing the right thing by, from an ED&I perspective?
Yeah.
If you think about AI, we want to know, don't we, that our companies are using AI and that are at the cutting edge of tech, but it has a huge impact on our sustainability. So is our company leveraging AI in the right way, but is it also doing the right thing to offset that and the impact that it has on the planet? And I think more and more so, people think about that now, as opposed to traditionally it was, this is the job role, this is the salary. It's much more rounded, holistic view of what's available for us from an opportunity perspective. So I think when you think about tomorrow's world, about those future generations, what will be the most attractive places to work, and the companies that are at the forefront of that will have worked out that it needs to be an entire package as opposed to just kind of a job offering. And in that package, what will be really important to that generation, because they stay in jobs for 3 to 5 years, because a job isn't for life now, because we're all changing how we stay in jobs, whether you're from that generation or not. People have been liberated to change careers, will be that the company's doing the right thing and that the company that they're going to is also invested in them, and that they're able to retrain and reskill and continue to progress in the career as they see fit.
I suppose it's because their parents, mostly of the generations that didn't have the same job security. I mean, I say that there's lots of people, possibly the majority of the people in the world of the previous generations didn't have this job security that we talk about, but a lot of people did, right? A lot of people in Britain did have a career for life. But there was a lot of people, especially when we're talking about people from different backgrounds, who never had a job and can never get a job. And maybe their children are entering the workforce for the first time. But my generation, your generation, millennials, we've never had real job security. It's something that I saw as people retired, that they had been there all that time, but I could never imagine it, and nobody I work with would ever plan to stay that long. And we've went through a few recessions as well. So it's the way that the new generation have been brought up to be, digital natives. And as they're approaching the age that they're going to enter the workforce, they may have already had to make difficult decisions as they look at perhaps jobs that they were interested in that they don't necessarily see so much as a future in. For example, you'll see on the internet a lot of people who might have wanted to go into video effects, seeing that that they're worried that it's not going to be what they thought it was, because movie studios are talking to OpenAI about how some of this stuff can be just magically done by AI, and that's going to give them possibly a different cynical view to AI that we might have, where we're like, yes, brilliant, we caught the end of the Jetsons in the 80s or something like that, and we're expecting some great future, robots helping us out, maybe not the bad movie stuff like the Terminator, but we're expecting to help, support us, whereas they might have seen this as a threat to their creative juices being taken away before they've even started. So I suppose we've got to be respectful of that as well, in that we might employ somebody not just because we're doing the cutting edge of technology and we do well with the environment, but also because we're, as a tech company, doing the right things with AI, things that sit well with them.
Yeah, I think so. I kind of had a right smile when you said about the older generation and parents having job security, because my dad was a miner and he definitely didn't have job security. So very quickly I had to pivot and do something else, right? I
live in an old mining town, and the last mine closed maybe 6 or 7 years ago. So there's lots of people in the 80s. There's a whole thing. But I kind of missed most of that because I was only a little kid.
Yeah.
But you can't say they had the job security, but my dad retired at 50 or 55, where I worked at university, and people would leave at like 55 on half a salary. And you thought, first of all, I thought that's not going to happen to me. Then I thought, I don't want that. I don't want to be in the same job all my life and then just hope to get a bump at the end so I can then live on not a lot over time, as it goes. At the end of it, and I look at it, and I'm 43 now, and I think I've surely got more than 20 years left in me to do stuff as well. People are younger for longer. The cast of friends are much older than me, and they still look young. So I'm like, we've still got a lot left in us.
Yeah,
we're going to feel younger for longer. People are going to live longer as well, and maybe even have 2 or 3 completely separate careers.
And I think that's where that you can look at strategic workforce planning again there, because it's about thinking about, we talk a lot about that kind of next generation and our kind of future-proofing ourselves. And I think that we often default to that being kind of university graduates and young people.
Yeah.
But to your point, right, you still think that you've got another 2 decades in work yet. So when we've
more,
hopefully.
I unfortunately got another 2 decades from one perspective, unless I win the lottery. But you think, I can't imagine it. My dad's 70, and it's like, what have you been doing for all that time? So, and he just potters around and helps out with church accounts and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so that would drive me mad.
And that's that piece around then that kind of that building and that boosting your internal talent, because it's not just people that are coming out of university now. Because of the rate at which technology changes the skill set that we need, you can have someone in your workforce that is at that, old world retirement age at 55, that kind of reskills, that learns the new skill, and are therefore at the start of another career again. So when you think about future-proofing your workforce and your kind of next generation of workforce, it's not that old view of kind of who is the young talent coming in. That's still incredibly important. I deal a lot with early years talent programs, and it's an incredible implement for driving that diversity and opening the door to the groups of people that aren't traditionally in tech in the market because of how the tech industry's been. So it's incredibly important. But also I think that as kind of we move forward, those companies that are really on the ball will be looking at that kind of that 40 plus generation as well and going, hold on, these people have got another kind of 20, 30 years with us. What can we repivot there? What can we retrain there? As opposed to just looking at that junior talent coming in and looking at that younger pool for kind of emerging leaders. Like, I've been on an emerging leader program myself.
Yeah.
And I remember looking around the room and being like, there is no one in here over the age of 30 at the time.
Was it a bit like Chandler in Friends when he goes into marketing? He pivots his career completely.
Absolutely, that fantastic Friends reference there. And he's trying to market roller skates, right? But, so I remember going on one of those, and there was no one in that room over 30. I'm pretty confident, but why not? In the world of tech, we know more so than ever that it is more acute in tech that age does not equal stage.
Yeah.
So I think it's that. Again, and we talked about how AI will really impact this, analysing your entire workforce as we move forward to make sure that the skills we've already got on those core fundamentals, what can we take from what we've got and what can we build on, reshape, redirect to be able to keep up with technology at the way it's which you're moving and not just rely on that open market.
So taking a leaf out of manufacturing and engineering companies, they do this seemingly a lot. I encounter it more often where, for example, at a large engineering firm, somebody that came, I think, from a town planning background, then moved into tech. I was fascinated when I went to a luxury car manufacturer and the digital transformation team. Some of the people in that team a year ago were test driving the new cars that they and we couldn't afford. As they were coming into production, they were part of that new car that had came out. And you're like, wow, they've came from those backgrounds where they understand the business so well. And I've worked with CTOs, and the guy at that company was an expert in the fabrication of whatever fluids it is that we use to make some sort of tapes and stuff like that. It's a very, very dry subject. But to that business, his technology acumen combined with his scientific knowledge of the process of the manufacturing means that he makes a much bigger difference than somebody with a pure tech background can make. 100%. And for us, somebody that somebody from the NHS, with a nursing background or a law background, all those kind of backgrounds that really the special sauce comes out of knowing. In our case, the people in the business and our customers don't know, the latest technology, how to put it together, what the art of the possible is. And then knowing the intricacies of the business at a deep level, not I've listened to you for an hour, now I've got a solution. That's where I think people moving careers, that's what gives them an advantage. Moving careers, but also picking, for example, an organization that works with people in your old industry. In fact, that's how I ended up in consulting. I worked at university, and the best move actually for me was to move to a professional services company, much like ourselves, that dealt a lot with universities, because I knew the industry. I knew how the people at universities think. I knew about all the different departments in it. I knew it really, really well. So it made it much, much easier for me to move across to a completely different job in tech, at least. There's different types then of people that you have to plan to bring in, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. And it's that transferable skill. It's that skills-based analysis. Do they have exactly what we need? Are they an expert in this X area? No, because that area has only, existed for a year. But do they have all the kind of skills that you would need to kind of move them over, if that makes sense? Like a really simple example of one of our graduates, one of our early years program, when we hired her, we put her into the Azure DevOps area. That's where she'd expressed an interest to be, and that's where she wanted to be. Our pipeline wasn't particularly strong in that area at the time, reflection of the market, and we just didn't have any work for them. It's not a good experience, right? So kind of had to think about things, and we went, she's got a degree in applied maths, and we've got a really strong pipeline in Power Platform, right? Surely that means that she's going to have the right skill set and could probably turn a hand there and understand it a little bit. Let's repoint. And we did. And she's flying. She's out on client delivery already. So it's that thinking outside the box. And I know that's kind of a very kind of a simplified answer there, but it is that kind of looking it's that draw across from what you've got here to what can it be over there.
Well, a lot of jobs where it requires a degree, it's not about what the degree's in, unless obviously you're a doctor or something, where clearly you don't want someone who had a degree in something completely different to be doing it. But I'm saying it like I think it, but when I worked at university, almost all the jobs required a degree. But because I somehow managed to get a job as a contractor and a secretary liked me that was influential, honestly, I ended up having a permanent role made for me. I was good at my job, obviously. That's why they took me on. But I felt very insecure for a long time about not having a degree because I thought, how do I move jobs? I haven't got a degree. So obviously I wanted to get a degree, eventually started a master's and things like that. But someone explained it to me sort of roughly, which was, it's really just about the fact that you have achieved a particular level. And that's the key thing, because you can train people to be able to do something, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they've got the capability to do it. And having something, it's almost like I basically told that it's a bit of paper that says you can probably learn something else as well. Yeah. And that means that you end up with a lot of people who've achieved that, they've learned all of that thing that they were really interested in, and they will move into jobs where they've done a degree in, I've seen people in jobs where they did a degree in geology, but now they're doing something very complex. And I think even if you do a computer science degree and you learn something like Java, and sometimes some universities will teach PHP, your skills aren't actually that useful to an employer out the gate anyway. You proved that you could learn a programming language, and now you're going to learn another one once you start in your new job. Yeah. So I suppose it doesn't matter so much about what it is. Skills are always transferable. It's having made the effort to learn to that level.
And I think that's why everything that you read and all the reports that are coming out, whether that be kind of McKinsey or the HBR, or like I said, are all leaning towards successful organisations will move towards skills-based hiring. And that is because, as we've said, kind of that traditional education is fantastic and it's absolutely still needed and will always have a place, because we will always need doctors. We will always need, people with specific degrees in specific areas. But because of the speed at which the world moves now, particularly in tech, if we were to be so firm that we said you can only have a job in this if you've got a degree in it, we would very quickly catch ourselves out, because things change so fast now, it wouldn't necessarily be possible to have a specific degree in that area. So again, it's doing that skills base. What does someone have? Or what have they done previously? Or do they have the right attitude and aptitude and the desire to learn? Do we have it internally? Is that person a standout member of our workforce, and therefore should we retrain them over here? Because why would we not? That would help with retention, the binding, strategic workforce planning. It's that as we move towards it, not being able to predict what skills we want, we have to rely more so on understanding the skills across the entire workforce, and then almost picking out which ones we want to play to keep in line with and to keep up to speed with what the market wants.
It sounds like a very difficult job, because in comparison, a degree or equivalent experience is an easier ask, but it's trying to find somebody that could learn those things or has got the capability to learn them. I suppose sometimes you might find that someone's extremely capable, like at school, could do better on a school report, and they could do better. They could be one of the next leaders if they're only in that role. And that's trying to find, as some people at Microsoft who have that sort of skill set call themselves, like trying to find unicorns, those people who have perhaps underutilized talent but will be really good at something and something could be seen, or those people that can actually turn their hand to something new very, very quickly, and could move around the business to different roles. So I don't envy having to do that, because that's quite, it's hiring one person is hard.
Yes.
Trying to bring somebody into a role who's not experienced, then train them up is absolutely so difficult. So yeah, you should you take all the help you can get. I certainly would. So I imagine your colleagues in professional services, which I guess I'm one of, must be very pleased to have some of your expertise in that regard.
I'd like to think that, and the jokes I crack, maybe I've livened it there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So workforce planning, if we could wrap it up then in what your challenges are, and give us a little bit of 30 seconds on what the challenges are, and what can we take away from this?
I think if I was to speak about workforce planning in general over the coming kind of years and whatever that may be, I think the challenges that all organisations will face is making sure that they develop their talent at the speed that technology develops in the market to be able to keep up with the client ask. And I think probably one of the biggest kind of tools that people will have to do that is that skills-based analysis, and using AI to really understand exactly who you've got in your workforce, what that skill set is, and how we kind of take that and transfer it into what tomorrow's world needs. And
that's sort of faced with then tools that, as you say, you need to leverage to be able to get on top of quite a complex interwoven challenge. But then also we've got this AI revolution where we actually don't know whether it might not be an AI revolution, but knowing that the pace of change is quicker at the moment and perhaps for the next few years than it has been in the past, more so than the cloud, more so than PCs and so on, that it means you've got to be able to react very, very quickly to the demand for skills and pivot, I suppose, as things change in terms of what our customers want. Actually, what we want to be doing as a business could well change as we lock onto particular types of technology or the way that we want to see AI used with our customers. That might change that as well. So it's going to be a mixed bag. But it sounds like we've got a handle on it. We've solved this. That maybe that should be the tagline for the future podcasts as well. People are on. Can you solve it? Yeah, solved it. We've got it. Get some AI tools. React really quickly. Get an Eden. You'll be fine.
I mean, I will take that huge compliment, but I'm not sure it's that simple. I think we're all doing our part, aren't we, and all trying to figure out kind of what comes next and how we stay abreast of that. But I think it's probably much more of an art than a science at this point with the pace that things go. So
yeah, I mean, AI seems to be in some cases, people are discovering things and they don't know what they're doing. Yeah, it's beautiful in a way. It makes computing interesting again because you're discovering things, and it also brings a new path for people to become interested in technologies. That early years careers, I used to worry that no one will be able to type things in and see the magic happen because they've had it with them all their lives. An app in a second on your phone. Why would you type something in to make a circle draw on a screen? But there's a certain, and my kids can see this as well. There's a certain fun that comes from getting AI to do things that would otherwise have taken you months to do on a computer otherwise to get to that point, because it has that knowledge in it when you're asking it to code and stuff. So it could mean that we're going to get some real sort of talent come through that we haven't even seen over the last 10 years because the bar was so high to get to that point that people would lose interest before then. But it'd be much more interesting to do a software development degree now, assuming it was a university that leveraged AI, so you could, with an assumption that by the time you're employed, you wouldn't be building all the basics. You'd learn about it, but you're not going to, like a calculator, those entrants into the workforce will be the most interesting because they'll be able to make things so far ahead of what, people who are graduating now could do without AI. That it's just going to be an interesting time.
It really is. That level of creativity will definitely definitely start to come through, and I'll be forever grateful for the invention of AI on how quickly and easily it helps me plan holiday itineraries, if nothing stage. So, I would like it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That was a really interesting conversation. It's good to chat to you. And thank you for listening as well. And of course, join us for the next Technology Boardroom podcast.